time, you know, because I like Tibetan art, and I became friends with her. And one day she came up to me and said, Stuart, everybody is worried about dying. Me, I don't care. I just want to come back as a spring day. I'll never forget that. It was just beautiful.
Isn't that in Moving On? You have a little segment about that in Moving On.
Probably, you know,
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I never forgot that. It was just wonderful.
Where was that? Was that in New York?
Staten Island, New York.
Staten Island, okay.
The most outrageous place to have a museum of Tibetan art,
Oh.
Staten Island. I mean, it's incredible. And then when I had my gallery, I got to know the curator, and I used to sell him stuff, you know. I used to come to buy art for me for the museum. Museum at 110th Street. And they had an exhibition of tankas. And I happened to be just walking past, and I said, oh my God, let's go see this. I walked in and I felt like I found all my relatives hanging on the wall, you know? It was extraordinary. I walked in, I said, oh my God. It's like I knew all those, you know, Lohans and gods and demi, whatever, you know, gurus, Rinpoches. I was about 22, 23 years old at the time. By Brandeis University. Basically, because I'm really kind of tired, you know, I'd like to just have a meditation class. You know, as I was telling everybody, I had that second vaccination today, and I've been feel like I've been could barely get out of bed. It's been very strong. You know, no pain or anything, just tired, you know. So we'll have a meditation, and then afterwards, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them. Does anyone have a question? I mean, these classes are so strong, it's hard to talk after them. It's like I said this afternoon in the meditation, when people ask questions, it very often releases in me a great deal of energy. And the things that come out are things that, you know, sometimes they even stun me, what comes out. Questions are important, but not intellectual ones, not things from the head. Things that come from deep inside, you know, things that with the answer can create changes in you. Does anyone have a question I would like to ask?
Or Chikor, should we invite the soul force of our teachers along with the Shakti?
Should you invite the soul force of your teachers? Why not? You know, they're waiting for you to be open enough to receive, you know, energy from the cosmos. That's what they're there for. You know, I said it before, I'll say it again. It's a miracle to have teachers of the level of Rudy and Nityananda, you know, Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, these incredible saints, you know, that their soul force is in the cosmos, and they will come if you ask for guidance, if you ask for the energy, the Shakti, They will come and help you to grow. That is what they want to do. Understand, they're there to protect us. They're there to guide us. They're there to provide Shakti, energy. But if you know, they say in the Bible, ask and you'll receive, you know, this is something that you learn when you're 3 years old, you know, and it's really true. You've got to ask. If you ask, they come. And it's not a matter of should I or shouldn't I, it's a matter of necessity.
Thank you.
And if they don't want to come, you got to demand that they come. You got to go up into the cosmos and create a racket and say, look, I need your energy. I need help to grow. I'm not going to accept the silence and come. And mostly these energies don't come because we don't work deep enough in ourselves to receive them. Does anyone else have a question? Yes?
To follow up with Chikur's question, how do you ask for such a thing?
Well, the answer is very simple. If your need is strong enough to connect with that kind of energy, you will find the voice inside yourself to ask. That question or that asking for cosmic energy stems from your need inside. And if your need isn't strong enough, it's not going to come. But if your need to grow spiritually is deep and profound and unflappable and unshakable, I mean, they will come. You know, you will ask and they will come. But you know, one has to have that kind of need.
How do you know if you have that kind of need?
Look, when you have that need, you won't ask that question. I mean it. It's like, how do you know when you're enlightened? You don't. You're enlightened. You know? Understand? How do you know? When you grow, this happens organically inside. It's not a matter of passing a test, you know, an algebra exam and getting a degree. It's just an organic process that takes place. And then that question becomes irrelevant.
Stuart, this is Emma. I'm wondering if you have any stories of Rudy and anger.
Yes, I can tell you 50 of them. He told me how full of shit I am in a very angry voice. And then my favorite story, I'll never forget walking across Manhattan with Rudy. And he was complaining and complaining. There wasn't one thing right in the world, not one thing that was right. He was going on and on about past, you know, relationships, his mother, you know, life, business, everything was. And he was angry, you know, but it wasn't really anger. It was just tension of the day that had built up inside him and he needed to get rid of it. And he taught me about that, about, you know, when you're with your teacher, you can be used that way. If the teacher has to drop some anger, some tension. And I listened to him. And by the time we got to the meditation room, you know, we went up, and he walked into the room. He got up on the stage there on the, you know, and he started talking. And it was the most beautiful, sweet, nurturing energy I ever heard in my life. It was all about God is love and how we need to get past ourselves in order to connect with higher energy in the universe. And he was angry before. And what he just needed to get rid of his tension because he knew he had a class to teach. And he used me as a sounding board for that. You know, years before, I would have gotten very upset. And, you know, and I said, no, Stuart, you know, he's your teacher. He saved your life. You had a rough day today. You can listen. You can take in what he's giving on. And I'm telling you, by the time we got to the meditation room, the whole energy had completely transformed. And he gave one of the sweetest, most beautiful talks about how essential it is to be a happy person and to be full of God. And it was incredible. And one would say, well, this is, you know, hypocrisy. It's not. It was an intelligent use of the tension that built up in him during the day to get rid of it so that he can truly teach on a very high level. And there was anger. I mean, Rudy, you know, Rudy, I mean, there were times that Rudy was not an easy person. You know, he was very difficult and he demanded a great deal from you. I remember once he asked me to clean a showcase in his store. I'll never forget this. And I was really tired. I was this, and I did a really half-assed job of cleaning that. And I did. It was terrible what I did of cleaning that showcase. And he came up and he looked at it and he got really pissed off at me. And he said, would you do that in your own house? How could you do this? I asked you to do something for me and this is what you present me? Boy, was that a lesson. I spent the next 3 hours cleaning that showcase until it was spotless. It was, you know, I learned how to give a gift. You don't do it half-assed. You know, and it was amazing to be around him that way. And you learn to not judge, you learn to listen and use whatever is being told you and find an opportunity to make it work for you in your life and to grow. And then I was able to take that and transfer it to my daily life. I mean, you know, being in business, you know, for so many years and all the anger and the greed and the unhappiness you're confronted with, you have to know how to transform it in yourself or it kills you. I learned that from Rudy. I certainly didn't know it when I was younger. So yeah, Rudy, you know, Rudy was not easy to be around him, you know. First of all, his energy was so strong. It was so intense. And I would never talk when I was around him. I would just sit and do my meditation. I couldn't even open my mouth. His energy was so strong. And I remember once I went to him and got on my knee and I started telling him about my spiritual experience. And he was sitting there with some friend of his and he just looked at me and he said to this guy, the schmuck thinks he's having a spiritual life. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget it. And I said, no, Stuart, he's right. You're a schmuck. Look, you've been studying this 6 months. He's been doing it 35 years. Keep your mouth shut, listen, learn, and grow. Don't know anything. Because if you start knowing things, it just becomes your ego that's responding. And you have to learn how to turn whatever it is life gives you, how to turn it around to make it work for you. So that there's no positive and negative, there's just energy as it comes to you. And you have the system inside to make it work for you. Instead of, oh, you're going to fight the war and the battle and you know better and, you know, nobody's going to insult me, and, you know, that kind of crap, you know. Doesn't mean you're a piece of milk toast in that life, but you know how to turn whatever life gives you around. And that takes incredible strength inside. You know, it's not a milquetoast that can do that. It's a very strong person. And I used to see Rudy do it, you know, with his business, with people, with his mother. God, what used to go on with his mother? There's a chapter in a book in itself, you know, how he transformed all her tension into kindness and generosity. And at the same time, he would get in the back, do the books, leave me alone. I don't want to hear it. You know, I would hear this. I'm sitting there doing meditation. I would hear stuff like that. At the same time, he would turn it all around, and he loved her dearly. And he taught me how to love my mother, you know, how to bring the best that I could possibly bring to my mother. His mother was not an easy person either. She once came up to me and said, Stuart, she said, you get your energy from God and spirit. I get mine from diamonds. She's great. I get mine from diamonds. That's where I get my spiritual energy. I said, Ray, God bless you. Does anyone else have a question you would like to ask? I get angry. It doesn't last very long, and it's forgotten 12 seconds after it happens. But, you know, I can get pissed off at people. They do such stupid things sometimes that you really get annoyed. But then it's gone. You know, I forget about it. 2 seconds. I don't even remember being angry, you know? Just move on.
Stuart, Claudia, my question is, since Rudy teaches that we need to overcome our instincts in order to grow, what's the difference sometimes with that or a gut feeling that is in your hara? I'm confused by that. I mean, what I'm saying is there?
Rudy never taught you.
Is instinct ever a useful thing to have?
Instinct is a very important thing to have. Instinct is your initial reaction to something, which is almost always the right reaction to something. Instinct. Now it's a matter of whether you allow that instinct to carry on to where you know you have to live with that energy for months, or do you just move on? You know, you learn how to transform it into chi, into energy inside. But instinct is a very important thing. You know, you sit and mull over things and think about them and analyze them, and by the time you're finished, they're all dead, you know?
Yeah.
They're all dead. Most great creativity comes from instinct, comes from spontaneity. Artists with a brush, you know, painting, and that energy flows through, and it's spontaneous. But you need to know the craft, you understand? And the craft is not some rational thing. You develop the craft of what it means to be an artist, a singer, a dancer, a doctor, a lawyer. And when you master the craft, then that energy flows through. Instinctually, it gives you the right answers in situ, because you have mastered the craft. If you don't master the craft, it's not going to work. So our job is to master the craft of inner work. So when spiritual energy flows through, we know exactly what to do with it.
Thank you.
I remember Rudy, you know, I mean, you talk about instinct. I mean, he was doing a fast, Rudy, right? And we were on our way up to Big Indian, and the car broke down right in front of a pizza parlor. And he just looked there and he said, it must be God's will. And he went and broke the fast with a slice of pizza. I mean, instinct, you know, I mean, humor about things, you know, it's life. It's wonderful, you know. Oh, you can't break your face. Well, God broke the car down in front of a pizza pole. I'm going to slice of pizza. Does anyone else have a question?
Stuart, you said your first reaction is usually accurate. So could you just talk a little more about that? Because a lot of times the first reaction, you know, usually, well, can be intense or, you know, very negative or whatever. So can you just elaborate on that, if you would?
You know, the spontaneity of the first reaction is almost always the right reaction. Just, you know, spontaneously responding to what is being given to you by life. And it's always a reaction, you know, that is right on. You know, then we think about it, we analyze it, we this, we that, we the other, and we don't really have the creativity to deal with the problem. It all gets chewed up in our analysis. You know, I mean, look, you know, I'll tell you the kind of thing, I mean, I get very, my spontaneity is very right on, but I take a few breaths. Before I go and scream at somebody, I take a few breaths. I quiet myself down. I allow myself to see the person as a human being. And I say, it's my job not to scream at them, but to find a place for them in my heart, or I can talk to them. I can talk to them from a place of love. Understand? That's spontaneity, not analyzing and figuring and going home and mulling it over, but feeling your response, and then take a few breaths. And don't think about it, but just keep your heart open, love inside you, so that when you interact with, I mean, I've told you that story about 1,000 times already about Big Indian, when the manager of the place was screaming at me because I was cutting grass on a tractor. And I just kept my mouth shut. My initial response was to be angry. I said, no. I said, Stuart, just keep your mouth shut and listen to him. And by the time he got finished dumping all this tension on me, you know, I mean, tears came in his eyes and he said to me, Stuart, thank you. God bless you, thank you. You know, and I mean, what a better result than a fist fight, you know? And all it was me keeping my mouth shut. And this guy was a friend of mine, for God's sake, you know, and listening to him. And I knew that it was just tension coming out of him. So when I'm talking about spontaneity, I'm not talking about getting angry and then slugging somebody. I'm talking about an initial reaction and then, you know, discovering in yourself that part of you that connects with that other human being as a human being, and that can listen to them and open to them. You know, and it works. It works so much in my life, you know. I mean, it worked with my daughter, you know. I came here, oh, I'm going to teach her meditation. That's going to be the same. And I said, no, just listen to her. Find out what her real needs are, not what I think she needs. And as soon as I did that, everything turned around. It all turned around. So it's not being spontaneous. It is really having the inner strength to be able to interact with another human being in a conscious way. To interact with all the, you know, stuff of life in a conscious way. That's what I mean by spontaneity. So we become a master of our anger because we have grown enough inside to keep our hearts open, you know? We've grown enough inside not to judge other people, but to learn from them, to allow them to truly be one's teacher. Now, this is not easy to do, but it really is worth building a system that can do it. And that is really one of the, it's one of the rewards of doing deep, deep meditation. You build that kind of inner life. And it takes enormous strength to do what I'm talking about. You know, to just scream at somebody and to, you know, get into a fight, that doesn't take strength. But to be, you know, I once had a student who was a very great martial artist, this guy. He taught a lot of people. And I once said to him, we were walking on the street, I said, you know, I said to him, great martial artists probably never get into fights. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, you're right on. They never get into fights. Their chi is so strong that when people get close, you know, it just melts. All the negativity just melts, you know. Does anyone else have a question you'd like to ask? Okay. All right, then we'll have meditation tomorrow evening. God bless you all. And again, thank you for being here, doing this. This is certainly helping me to grow and helping me to expand my life. And I'm very grateful for it. God bless you all. And we'll have a class tomorrow evening.
Thanks, Stuart.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Stuart.